In the days that followed, Berko continued to teach the people about their heritage, ignited by a fire that burned within him. His voice steady but filled with conviction as he addressed the gathering crowd. The people of Omatata, weary from the rising tensions, leaned in to hear his words. "My people, do not be afraid. God said, I am your shield, your exceedingly great reward. Our ancestors wandered in the wilderness for 40 years because of unbelief and disobedience. They entered into bondage from generation to generation because they failed to keep His commandments. Obey His commandments. Do not worship any other gods. Do not worship idols made of man's hands. Return, backsliding people. Return to your God. How long will you wait? Awake out of your sleep, you that slumber. Horses know their masters, but you do not know your God. For a little while He left us, but not forever. You have eyes, but you see not. You have ears, but you hear not. The trumpet will sound and time will roll into eternity. Amend your ways and your doings. Take care of the poor, the orphan, and the widows. Do not take advantage of those who are weak." Adana, standing among the crowd, watched Berko with pride and concern as the villagers exchanged glances, unsure if Berko's faith would be enough to protect them from the storm that brewed from Chief Okoro and Senior Father. Lately, Chief Okoro had taken his meeting outdoors. At the edge of the village, Chief Okoro lounged under the sprawling baobab tree, surrounded by a small but growing crowd. His voice was smooth, persuasive, and laced with promises. Chief Okoro was relentless in his effort to claim back the people of Omatata. "The old ways are shackles holding us back," he declared, spreading his arms wide. "Omatata needs progress, and I am the man who can lead you to it." His frustration was evident. His own influence was waning. Fewer people attended his meetings now, and whispers of his misdeeds clung to him like shadows. The village had not forgotten the pain he'd caused, the families he'd torn apart, or the young girls he had exploited. His name, once powerful, now carried the weight of distrust. Distrust and unsettling questions lingered in the air. Whispers of Chief Okoro unsettling behavior in Omatata began to circulate. Chief Okoro's face darkened as if he knew what they were thinking. His grin disappeared. "Focus on the future. Your future with me as your chief. Omatata is broken and I alone can repair it." The crowd murmured, some nodding in agreement, others shifting uncomfortably. His arms crossed, his face dark with irritation. His voice cut through their murmurings like a blade. "And what of those who lead but cannot live as they preach?" He growled, his words laden with scorn as he conjured up the most despicable lies about Berko. Berko is not who he seems. He is a hypocrite and hungry for power. Soon the people were filled with fear, mistrust, and confusion. But Berko was equally as persuasive as he carried the burden of his mission daily. Berko's voice trembled with fervor as he faced the gathered crowd, his eyes burning with conviction. "Listen to me, my people. Our ancestors, yes, our fathers, defied the law of God. They chased after false gods, idols carved by human hands. And in His infinite wisdom, He sent His Son, born of flesh, to bear the weight of our sins, to redeem us, and to show us the way." He paused, scanning their faces, his own etched with anguish. "But we didn't believe Him. Our people rejected Him. They handed Him over to be killed like a criminal. His blood, His precious blood, was spilled for us. And not just for them then, but for us now. Even for our children yet to be born. His blood still calls out to us, still covers our sins. Please hear me. Come back to the God of our ancestors. Come back through the shed blood of the Messiah." Berko continued, "Come and let us return to the Lord, for He has torn, but He will heal us. He has stricken, but He will bind us up. Open your hearts to receive His forgiveness and His cleansing." The crowd murmured uneasily, their emotions torn between Berko's impassioned plea and the weight of their doubts, a seed sown by Chief Okoro. In the days that followed, Senior Father lingered on the outskirts, trying to summon his usual air of authority, but his shoulders sagged under the burden of his own crumbling reputation. God's work must go on, he declared to those few loyal followers who remained. "Your offerings are for Him, not for me." But the crowd was unmoved. A woman near the front spoke up, her voice shaking with suppressed anger. "And what of the last time? You took our offerings and left. You abandoned us. How can we trust you now?" A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Senior Father's face tightened, desperation flashing in his eyes. "I have changed," he bellowed. "I am here for you now, for the people, for the work of God." The weight of his plea hung in the air, thick with longing, regret, and hope. Would they listen? Or had the wounds of betrayal cut too deep? But trust, once shattered, was slow to mend. The people folded their arms, holding their coins and offerings close. Their silence was louder than any words, a judgment that weighed heavily on Senior Father. Standing once more before the people, Berko's words pierced their hearts, his voice cracking with emotion. Don't look to men. Not to me, not men with sweet tongue who will tickle your ears with empty promises. Look to the God who never fails. His mercy is greater than the sins of any man. Please, come back before it's too late. In the days that followed, tension gripped the village of Umatada like a coiled serpent ready to strike. Whispers carried through the wind, slipping into the cracks of every hut. Hushed voices plotted, each word sharper than the last. Lies slithered through the village, twisting truths into unrecognizable shapes. Distrust festered like an open wound, dividing families and friends. In the unseen corners of Umatada, shadows moved with intent, diabolic and insidious, thriving on deception. The village stirred uneasily, the people caught in an invisible web they could neither see nor understand. Unusual dark clouds rested over Umatada, hinted at the storm, building on the horizon, racing to unravel the very fabric of Umatada itself. What is this? Berko's voice cracked as he held up the papers, his hands trembling. His eyes searched Adana's face, desperate for an answer. Is this what I think it is? His disbelief was palpable, each word heavy with pain. Adana hesitated, her gaze flickering between Berko and the door. Her voice was low but resolute. I have to be sure, she said, her tone tinged with anguish. She took a shaky step back. I have to protect my child, my family. Before he could say more, she turned and walked out, the door clicking shut behind her. Berko stood frozen, the silence around him deafening. The papers in his hand felt heavier with each passing second. His breath hitched as reality began to sink in, his knees threatening to buckle. Adana, now outside, didn't pause to look back. Her heart pounded as she made her way to Aunt Nia's house. The moment she stepped in, her composure broke. Auntie, my world is crumbling around me, she cried, her voice choked with emotion. Aunt Nia listened as Adana told her that she served Berko separation papers with a restraining order because she had no choice. I have seen pictures, Auntie. I don't even know how it got to this point. Aunt Nia, reaching for her as she babbles incoherently. Aunt Nia's expression, a blend of sympathy and strength. She placed her comforting hands on Adana's hands. My dear, I know you're hurting, she said softly. But you've always been a seeker of truth. Impulsive, yes, but your heart is in the right place. Trust that the truth will come out no matter how painful it feels right now. Adana's tears flowed freely, but Aunt Nia's words offered a glimmer of solace, even as doubt gnawed at her. What if it's too late? What if I've destroyed everything? Back at home, Berko crumbled onto the sofa, the papers still clutched tightly in his hand. Bearing resemblance to a disheveled broken man, hot tears spilled down his cheeks, his chest heaving as a wave of grief overtook him. His voice was a broken whisper, barely audible in the stillness of the room. Why, Adana? Why couldn't you trust me? How do you stop a tidal wave of whispers? A tsunami of lies? Berko thought to himself. The ache in his heart was unbearable, each tear a testament to his shattered hopes. The walls seemed to close in on him, his mind spiraling with unanswered questions. And yet, somewhere in the depths of his despair, a faint glimmer of determination began to stir. The truth he vowed would not remain hidden forever. That night Adana slept at Aunt Nia's house with Berko Jr. When sleep finally decided to visit Adana, she found herself at an outdoor gathering as the sun has just disappeared beyond the horizon. It was dusk. A baby walked up to her as if sent, searching out her face with uncertainty. She looked down, giving him a welcoming smile. She said, "Hi, baby." The baby's face lit up as he returned her smile, trustingly raising both hands in the air, beckoning her to pick him up. Without hesitation, Adana bent to pick up the baby, placing her hands under each arm. She experienced a sudden weakness in her left hand, causing her to stoop down and cradle the baby with both hands so that he did not fall. She comforted the baby in her arms. The scene changed, but not really, because Adana was at an outdoor gathering as the sun has just disappeared beyond the horizon. It was dusk. A baby walked up to her as if sent, searching out her face with uncertainty. She looked down, giving him a welcoming smile, and said, "Hi, baby." The baby's face lit up as he returned her smile, trustingly raising both hands in the air, beckoning her to pick him up. Without hesitation, Adana bent to pick up the baby, placing her hands under each arm. She experienced a sudden weakness in her left hand and thought to herself, didn't this just happen? as she stooped to cradle the baby with both hands so that he did not fall. She comforted the baby in her arms. Adana felt the warmth on her face as the sun peeped through the small window in Aunt Nia's house. Adana was puzzled. How could she have the same dream back to back in one night? What is the God of her ancestors telling her? Would she ever understand? Back at Berko's house, sleep evaded him as he struggled to understand the recent event that is now shattering his world. This was the fiercest battle Berko had ever faced, one that demanded every ounce of his courage, strength, and resolve. But he couldn't falter now. He would fight no matter the cost. He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for his family and the souls of Omatata. He had to be strong. Each time he approached Aunt Nia's house, his heart ached with longing and frustration. He would wait, hope burning stubbornly in his chest, but Adana never came out. He called her name softly into the night, but silence answered him. It was as if a wall had been built between them, a wall he was desperate to tear down. Meanwhile, the village of Omatata buzzed with rumors and judgment. The whispers grew louder, the stares sharper, until the village leaders themselves descended upon him. They stood outside his door, their voices filled with anger and disdain. "Berko," they bellowed, fists pounding against the wooden door. "You cannot hide forever. You will answer for the shame you've brought on Omatata." Berko didn't answer. He crouched in the dim light of his small home, his fists clenched, his heart hammering in his chest. He could feel their fury like a storm pressing against his very soul. As night fell, he made his choice. Clad in the shadows, Berko slipped out of the village he had called home most of his life. The path before him was uncertain, but his resolve was ironclad. "I will be back," he whispered to himself, his jaw set with determination. His eyes burned with a fire that even shame and rejection couldn't extinguish. He would reclaim his honor. He would make things right with Adana. And he would face the village of Omatata not as a broken man, but as one who had fought and won the greatest battle of his life.